What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, and this is part 2 of my ranking the Kinks albums. I did 24 through 11 on the previous video, and then this will be the top 10. If you have not watched the previous video, I'm warning you, there's a couple, I'm not going to call them hot takes, because I'm not going to defend them. I'm just going to tell you what they are, because they are my favorite. But there are probably, I would say, at least 2 in the next 10 that will be somewhat of a like, oh, really? Huh, interesting choice. One of them I will try to defend of the 4 that I think are a little kind of, I don't know, not unanimous, I think. I was looking at a lot of lists with the Kinks, and there's a general consensus. There's a couple in here that usually fall towards the back. But I think the top 6 are pretty much in cement and will never change for me and represent... with an exception, because I'm not going to count a soundtrack album in order to make this work, represent a 6-album run that very few bands parallel or also achieved 6 consecutive albums of such high quality. But that's when we get to the top 6. But that's all I have to say about this. I talked about the Kinks a whole bunch in front of that other video. I also explained the Zappa connection in that other video. So if you're interested in those things, go watch that first video. But yeah, let's do this. On to my 10th favorite Kinks album. Yeah, number 10, Think Visual, came out in 86, right? Yeah, I got this when I was 16. The very first concert I ever went to by myself was on this tour. Saw them a couple times on this tour. This was the tour that their live shows on this tour inspired me to like dive down the Kinks rabbit hole and become a huge Kinks fan. I understand that it is not in any way a groundbreaking album musically, even lyrically. He's sort of just kind of treading the same ground Ray is. Musically, they're even recycling some like musical motifs from previous albums. There's a lot of like, hey, remember Come Dancing? We're going to throw a little bit of this dance hall type background keyboard music in. Yeah, there's a lot of repeated ideas in here, but there are also so many melodies that are just so pure and so good and so Ray Davies-ish that I just absolutely love this album. And even listening to it now, like, what, 86, however many years ago, 36, 7 years after it came out, I still, when I put this on, especially when I get to like the latter half of the CD, never owned this on vinyl, always had the CD, and we hit a song like Natural Gift, which has just this beautiful, almost ABBA-esque piano-driven pop melody, or the Think Visual that precedes it, which has this nice little ska thing, but again, buried within this more upbeat ska pop vibe, or these really good Ray melodies. Working at the Factory opens it off, which I think is also a typical, like, how on the surface, it seems like, okay, Springsteen, Mellencamp, just had success earlier, you know, Born in the USA, Rain on the Scarecrow. Now we get Ray Davies dropping these Working at the Factory. But then you get into the song, and it's just Ray doing what he's always done, talking about the working class, and he somehow spins it to make it about music. And then you're like, wait a minute, is the Working at the Factory, like he talks about how he went into music to escape working at the factory, but by the end of the song, you're like, wait, is the factory... now that he's in music, that's the factory he's working in, which musically this album sounds like an 80s pop factory, which is kind of weird. Or, you know, so there's levels to his writing still here on this album in 1986 that usually most people don't like. But I think it's a fantastic album. Working at the Factory, great lyrics. Lost and Found. There's a hurricane coming. Apparently a relationship is in disrepair, but it's just got so many good hooks in it. Some 80s overindulgent saxophone at the end, but I'm okay with it. Repetition, nice, really good, typical, like a very tight rhythmic section pop song. Welcome to Sleazy Town. The only song I kind of don't like is The Video Shop. A little not too very good, another ska vibe that maybe it doesn't work so well. But yeah, kind of a little cheesy, maybe a little Come Dancing nod at the end. But then... it's not horrible, but it's just probably the weakest thing on this album. Rock and Roll Cities, a Dave effort, not one of his best, but still it's kind of needed in the middle of this album. How Are You? Just a really solid album. Again, nothing new here. They're not breaking any new ground. Like, they're not taking any chances, but it's just at its best. The melodic hooks are so sweet and so pure and like just great, great pop 80s music. And I love this album. Yeah, I still think it's wonderful. I'm not going to argue for it. And if you put it towards the end, that's your right. Me, it's my number 10. Number 9 is 1979's Low Budget. This is the most like direct rock, hard rock effort in their sort of late 70s, 80s phase. A little punk attitude thrown in there. Not going to call any of this music punk, but the lead-off track Attitude, even the song Pressure, there's a little bit of, you can know they're listening to punk. They're aware of its existence. A little bit of that energy is seeping in there. The second album I ever got by the Kinks was a live album, One for the Road, which has followed this. It was on this tour. I think 5 of the songs on this album are on there. So I was introduced to those songs on this album. Then I eventually got this album, fell in love with the other songs. It's just a really good album-oriented rock, FM radio, staple type hard rock album by the Kinks. Attitude, little punky energy in there. But again, commentary on sort of the posers in society, you know, they're trying to be something they aren't. It's a pretty good little song. Catch Me Now I'm Falling, little global politics in there, but a really nice, almost proggy build to the song. Pressure, little punk rock. National Health, another nice little slow, weird little funky pop song. Wish I Could Fly Like Superman. Yeah, you can do disco as much as you want, Kinks. I'm all here for it. Low budget, hard rocker, In a Space, nice little poppy number. The only song I kind of don't like is A Gallon of Gas. They lean into like a somewhat bluesy vibe to sort of like give that I need a gallon of gas and it costs too much, kind of that like blues sadness. But like all of the songs on this album are about like a bad economy and like struggling in modern day life. And I think the entire album could have been a blues riff and it would have worked with the lyrics. As one track on the middle of at the end of the album, it just seems like they purposely were like, oh, let's try to mix things up and throw in some blues. I'm not a fan of blues unless you're just a straight up blues fan. One weird little thing I have. But yeah, first side is definitely better than the second side. I think toward the end, we start to trail off a little bit in the strength of the songs. But overall, it's a really good listen. Everybody gets a chance to shine. The band sounds great. It is very rooted in this era of like late 70s struggling. But now that, once again, the global economy is not doing so well, maybe people can connect with this a little bit more. But yeah, I like this. I like this album. All right. It's my number 9, Low Budget. Nice, good little hard rockin' effort from the Kinks. Number 9. Number 8 is Word of Mouth. This came out in 1984. This is the 3rd album I ever heard from the Kinks. I still think it's a really, really good album. I just think they're really good songs. Again, they're just in a really comfortable 80s sort of rock pop mode. They're not reinventing anything. They're not really even going into territory they haven't gone before. But I think it's a really good listen, and the songs are really good. The opening, Do It Again, has a really nice... Dave gets some chances to kind of flex his guitar muscles. It's one of those sort of Ray Davies songs where you have like different melodic pockets throughout the song that you kind of go from pocket to pocket to pocket with like just different little just earworms and different hooks that kind of get you. Word of Mouth, really interesting guitar tone on Word of Mouth, which I've kind of always liked. Just a very, I don't know, something about it. Good Day, really nice pop number. Living on a Thin Line. One of Dave Davies' best songs, definitely not his best, but one of his best. A great little kind of slow burning rock number. Sold Me Out, upbeat rocker. Massive Reductions, which has this awesome just keyboard synth intro before the drums kick in and we're just off. Awesome, awesome song. Guilty, which has some phenomenal drum work. Mick Avery, I think this is Mick Avery's last album. His drum work on Guilty is so fantastic. Too Hot, which is kind of the silliest song on here. It kind of, the chorus is about working out and sweating off your muscles or some weird like gymnasium type lyrics. But then the verses are about what these people are doing in their normal life, like that is stressful, and how they then go to the gym and like work out. And it takes what could be a cheesy, very let's take advantage of this Olivia Newton-John physical sensation of this era and turning it into something with a little more depth. Missing Persons, like a slower ballad, but then Summer's Gone, which I absolutely love. Such a phenomenal track. And then Going Solo to close out. I just think it's a really, really solid pop rock album with some great Dave Davies songs. Ray is at his best. A lot of different textures. There's not a stinker on them. Like, not all the tracks are as strong as others, but I don't think any of them are bad. Like, it's a really, really good album. And the band, man, Mick Avery just sounds absolutely fantastic, especially on Guilty. It's a good song. But yeah, that's my number 8, Word of Mouth. Number 7 is 1977 Sleepwalker. I'm not going to try to convince you that Word of Mouth or Think Visual are these great albums. I am going to try to convince you that Sleepwalker is their most criminally underrated album. It is 100% a product of the 70s. It is a very on the verge of yacht rocky, kind of Steely Danny. Very much in almost every song on here, I can hear elements of another 70s artist from like earlier, the first half of the 70s, maybe a little bit from Things Yet to Come, which when you think about Ray and everything he's about, makes perfect sense. Ray's reached a point in 77 where he's like not looking back on what England was like back in the glory days, but what music was like back in the early 70s. And he's taking elements of that. I'm not saying he's doing that, but it would make perfect sense within his sort of overall lyrical philosophy if he did. But I think this is just an absolutely fantastic album with some of the best sort of soft rock melodic hooks. It is a very poppy album. It is a very sort of subdued album, but I think there's some energy, some really good energy in some fantastic places, and just some of their best, I don't know, writing of just like melodies and song craftsmanship, but in a really AM radio sort of way. I don't know. Opens up with Life on the Road, which goes from this sort of like very acoustic-y, ballady thing up to something with like a little more momentum. Kind of reminds me of maybe like Don McLean's like American Pie or Rod Stewart's the title track to Every Little Picture Tells a Story. Just how the verses have this momentum that just keeps you going from verse to verse to verse to verse, and it just kind of carries you away. And it's not a Life on the Road is horrible type song. It's like Life on the Road is like there's women and there's men and there's things, and you just kind of go with it, and it's fantastic, and it has a very celebratory vibe. The following Mr. Big Man just is almost like a little short little proggy number, but there's a middle section where Dave really gets a chance to play guitar. Reminds me of Alice Cooper, has some darker vibes in it. Kind of reminds me of like the early stuff from Alice Cooper from like the 71, 72, 69 through 71, 72 period. Just some nice vibe. Sleepwalker, the poppiest thing on here. And then Brother, sort of a longer duet with some nice sort of tasty guitar playing about the world is changing, but hey, you're my brother. Kind of another in the mini ballads that deal with the Davies brother situation. And then side 2 is like, just starts off with 3 of, I think, the most just almost perfect AM radio 70s songs. Jukebox music, my favorite jukebox song of the late 70s. I think the album version of this, if you've only heard the single version, there's a little percussion intro in the beginning that's not on the single version. Plus the end is kind of stretched out a little bit more. There's like a little like a down moment before it gets back up. I think it makes it a better song, even though the single version is still pretty good. And then Dave Davies sings Sleepless Night, takes the lead vocals on that, but I think Ray wrote it. Another great little song, kind of a middle of the road rocker that kind of fades out toward the end when it looks like there's maybe a longer guitar solo. Kind of disappointing. But then Stormy Sky, which has almost like these weird Alan Parsons synth prog vibes. One of Ray's best vocal deliveries. Just an absolutely beautiful, haunting, just an almost perfect song. But it is just 70s, right? And I understand when this came out, how you would hear this album and go, wow, this is what the Kinks are doing now. This is the avenue they've decided to drive down. This is so like not what they were doing before, right? But now in 2023, going back and listening to that, if this album came out today, I would like say this is the best album that, was never released in the 70s that represents the 70s. But it was released in the 70s. I think just people didn't appreciate the greatness of it. And then it closes out with Full Moon and Life Goes On. I love this album. Should have been called Sleeper and not Sleepwalker, because it is definitely my sleeper favorite, my sleeper classic in their catalog. And while I'm not going to argue that you need to go back and convince yourself of the genius of word of mouth or think visual, I do think this one deserves another listen or two, because there are some really, really, really good moments on this album. But now on to number 6, and the next 6, yeah, 6 of the greatest albums ever made. Number 6 is 1971's Muswell Hillbillies. Yeah, I'm not going to argue why this is 6 instead of number 1. I'll give you reasons why it's fallen on my list. I think this is an almost perfect album. This is sort of Ray Davies taking sort of Americana music and country music, even a little bit of New Orleans jazz flavor, and like running it through a filter of his own working class English neighborhood, British neighborhood in Muswell Hill. And so it's almost this entirely new musical folk form that the Kinks are playing that's not really country, not really folk, very acoustic based. There is a lot of electric guitar on here, elements of different sort of Americana flavors, and this just interesting little mix of just amazing songs that are a little bit eclectic, that definitely kind of foreshadow the more indulgent stuff that would follow in the years to come. But yeah. And again, it's just all these portraits of like working class people or people living in the 20th century and trying to struggle through life and figure out their own questions or deal with their own problems. And yeah, it's just a really almost perfect album. It was my stepdad. This was the only Kinks album he had that I remember. Maybe he had more and I never found him on vinyl. So I knew this album pretty well early on. It was probably my favorite for probably a decade, who knows how many. But I think I probably just listened to it too much, so it's fallen to number 6. But these next 6 are all perfect albums. So yeah, 20th Century Man, great, very acoustic bass, just driving type acoustic number. Cute Schizophrenia, Paranoia Blues. The music kind of matches that with some weird like horn action. Holiday, Skin and Bone, probably my least favorite song on here. Alcohol, a phenomenal song. Complicated Life, Here Come the People in Gray. Some nice, really like acoustic marchers or acoustic stompers on here. Have a Cup of Tea, kind of a silly little Have a Cup of Tea flow away number. Holloway Jail, I Took My Baby, a bluesy effort that really works. I like this song. Oklahoma, USA, Uncle Son, and the absolutely phenomenal album closer, Muswell Hillbilly, with just some really upbeat, sprightly, almost want to dance type guitar, but with a nice, I'm a Muswell Hillbilly boy. Really great song. Really great album. Kind of a different flavor than anything else they've done. Very acoustic based. A lot of like interesting horn parts on here. But just a really, really solid album. Like, you rank this number 1, I don't blame you. You don't have this in your top 10. We got issues, people. We got issues. But a fantastic album. My number 6, Muswell Hillbillies. Number 5 is 1966's, 67's Something Else. This was probably my favorite Kinks album for a decade at some point in my life. One of those decades. Another like just probably perfect album. Opens up with a phenomenal David Watts. Another one of Dave's absolutely almost perfect songs. Death of a Clown is on here. Kind of a little touch of Dylan in the lyrics. The fantastic Harry Rag, Tin Soldier Man, and Situation Vacate closing out side A, which is just a phenomenal run of songs. Two Sisters, a nice little character study of two sisters, one who lives a wild, free life, the other one who settles down and becomes a sort of a parent, and how they look at each other. Love Me Till the Sunshine. We got 3 Dave Davies pen songs on here. Love Me Till the Sunshine, kind of a rocker. Funny Face, kind of a weird, quirky little pop number. Lazy Old Sun. Afternoon Tea, nice little Ray Davies, very English type commentary on, kind of leaning into where he would go on the next album. end of the season, and the album closes out with what could be one of the greatest songs ever in the history of music, Waterloo Sunset. Just I wanted to put this album number one simply because it is responsible for delivering Waterloo Sunset to the world, and that is worth something. Just an absolute perfect little song in all ways, shape, or form. The first time I went to London, I made sure to be at Waterloo Station at sunset. It was really crowded and cloudy, so it wasn't quite the romantic effect I thought it would be. But I was there once. I experienced, I didn't actually see. I experienced a Waterloo sunset once. But anyways, yeah, just a perfect album. Their little kind of, this is their, 1967. So this is their sort of kind of folky, Baroque poppy, but at times rocky, but just their weird little folky, unique Kinks mix that they perfected so well. They started to perfect on the previous album, that they would absolutely perfect on the next album. That this has like just that weird little Kinks, almost like everybody else is going psych and heavy and noisy and indulgent, and they're making these a little more delicate, intricate, folkier, more sort of populist type sounds, possibly. I don't know if they were populist, but anyways, yeah, just a great, great, great album. My number 5, Something Else. Oh, I stopped that instead of this. Number 4 is 1966, Face to Face. Their fourth album, a huge jump overall in just like songwriting and intent and execution, and just like, I think they're aiming for the moon, and you reach whatever. They're aiming much higher on this one than I think they were on the previous 3. Starting to lean into that little more unique, weird psych pop sound that they would, folky sound that they would go into on Something Else, which I just talked about, and then the album after that. Sunny Afternoon is on here, another one of those songs that can elevate an entire album just because it is such a perfect song. A perfect song that I think Sunny Afternoon, it's the penultimate song on this entire album, is like your perfect example of a Ray Davies song. Like really, really good pop music with sweet melodic hooks that are going to stick in your ear for, who knows, hours. But when you listen to the lyrics, you're like, oh, this is really super depressing, man. Yeah, it's a sunny afternoon, but this guy has no money. He's probably going to lose his house. This is really horrible stuff. But, oh, yeah, the music is all happy and upbeat. And that is something Ray does better than anybody. And Sunny Afternoon might be the perfect example of that. Opens up with Party Line, probably like the most Beatle-esque of these songs. But at the same time, he's talking about a party line like on the telephone. Whole other thing, like dated songs, like we don't even have like party lines anymore. I think there's an operator and a party line on here. I think the first line in this entire song is like, so like things don't even exist like this anymore. But there's some interesting lines in here because he's like, there's even a question like, I wonder if she is even a she, or still like these weird gender bending sort of ideas that Ray would toy with pretty much throughout like all of his lyrics throughout his entire career. Some great songs on here. The third song, Dandy, which opens up with just some really nice, just Ray and some acoustic guitar, just sounds really good. The production on here is really good on some of these. Rainy Day in June, little psych number with some weird little out there sci-fi lyrics almost. Holiday in Waikiki, another weird little kind of experimenting with different musical types. Really interesting lyrics about, going to a foreign place and embracing sort of different cultures and different ideas about people. Fancy, Little Miss Queen of Darkness, Sunny Afternoon, I'll remember. Yeah, just a perfect album. Just a great, this album should be known by more people. Yes, it does sound dated. It does sound like a 1967 pop folk album, but this is 66, right? 1966 kind of psych pop folk album, but the songwriting, the band itself, the lyrics go places that other bands were going at this time. Just another perfect album, right? I said there were 6 in a row, 6 perfect. This was the first. Muswell Hillbillies was the last. Something Else was the second in that order. So the next 3 albums on this list are the ones that were 3, 4, and 5. And let's get to those. My number 3. My third favorite album is Arthur, or The Decline and Fall of the British Empire. This came out in 1969. In that run of 6 perfect albums, you have Face to Face, you have Something Else, you have the third one. This was the 4th one in that sequence. Lot more of an upbeat rockin' album, actually kind of heavy, a little bit like, this is like some good hard rock stuff we get on here. We even get a little bit of a jam, like sort of a jam session on one of these. We get some great lyrics. We get some long sort of acoustic songs that sort of develop over time and then get a little more energetic and crazy. We just run the gamut all over the place. We get some nice anti-war commentary on here. Just a phenomenal, perfect album, man. Opens up with Victoria, a really good rocker. I think I read a review, like one of the first reviews I ever read of this album, I think it was from Christogal. Was that how you say his name? Robert Christogal? I don't know. From the LA Times or LA Weekly out in Los Angeles. He had said that you can hear like Dave like yelling in the background in the studio because he's so excited to actually be like rocking out, that's the sound of just Dave's exuberance on this opening track. Great opening track. Yes Sir, No Sir, Some Other Sun, nice little kind of slower but funkier numbers with different sort of like Beatlesque parts in them. Drive-In, the only song I kind of don't like. Brainwashed, absolute rocker. Some 2 great riffs in this, some great energy, just like 2 minutes and 34 seconds of like hard rock energy. Australia, which starts off kind of ballady and slow and then has this really nice epic sort of jam, a very noodly jam at the end. Side 2 opens up with the acoustic-driven Shangri-La, which kind of erupts into something more transcendent and majestic towards the end, with some really good lyrics about sort of commentary on modern life in England. Mr. Churchill says, nice little fun pop psych number commentating on English government. She's Bought a Hat Like Princess the Marina, an over-the-top, silly little fun number, kind of like a early Traffic psych pop number or something maybe the Dukes of Stratosphere would pay tribute to on a later album. Young and Innocent Days, a little more somber. Nothing to Say, another really good, fun kind of rocker, I guess you would call it, maybe a little pop rocker. And then the awesome Arthur to close out, which kind of reminds me of the closer Muswell Hillbilly from an album 2 later. Just has that nice wrapping things up in a positive vibe type feel to it. Just a phenomenal album, a great album. A little more hard rock, and then the 2 that preceded it, then the 3 that preceded it, kind of going back a little bit to their early day roots, but with a much cleaner sound, much more purposeful sound. A lot of Beatles influences seeping in some of the sort of structures or dynamics of some of these songs. But yeah, just a band at its best, a songwriter at its best. Everything about this album is fantastic. This was the 4th in their run of 6 perfect albums. We got 2 left. On to number 2. Number 2 is 1968's The Kinks Are the Village Green Preservation Society. It's another perfect album. I've always thought of this as sort of the culmination of sort of the, I don't know, some weird psych pop folk, completely unique sound that they started to develop in Face to Face, kind of honed it a little bit in Something Else, and then here it was just perfection. Just all these little most of them are under 3 minutes. I'm just realizing there's one that's 4 minutes. All these 2.5 minute little pop nuggets that are sometimes folky and sometimes maybe psyche, sometimes a little weird, sometimes a little ballady, sometimes maybe a little proggy, but they're all give you just a slightly different little flavor. But they're all just kind of about English life and English people and just, what it would be like to just kind of be English. Or just about modernity, the modern life and people taking pictures and just what it's like to live in the 20th century. And it's a perfect album. It is, I saw somebody say this once, that it is like when you pull out the individual songs, maybe they don't quite compare to individual tracks from other albums, but when you put them all together, like the forest is much greater than the trees. The sum is much bigger than the whole. And all of these things work together just fantastically. But there are still some absolutely fantastic songs. Opening track, the Village Green Preservation Society, just some of Ray's best lyric writing. Do You Remember Walter? Picture Book, another fantastic song musically and lyrically. Johnny Thunder, Last of the Steam Powered Trains, the most sort of jammy thing on here. Things, little momentum gets built up as the last train starts to like run away. Big Sky, nice huge proggy number. Some nice little spoken word by Ray in there. Sitting by the Riverside, Feels Like You Are. Animal Farm, Village Green, Starstruck, Phenomenal Cat, probably the weirdest song on this album. All of My Friends Were There, nice little jaunty little number. Wicked Annabella, kind of the darkest number on here. Monica, and People Take Pictures of Each Other. Yeah, so just a really fun, great, perfect listen with just some of the best lyrics Ray ever wrote. Just some great musical accompaniment. Like, I don't know what to say about this. It's a classic. If you are a lover of music and you have not heard this album, you need to fix that mistake right now. This was the third in the series of perfect albums they put out. They put out Face to Face, then they put out something else, then they put out this, then they put out Arthur, then they put out another one, then they put out Percy, which I'm not counting because it's a soundtrack, then they put out Muswell Hillbillies. A perfect six run. But what was number one? It's the only one we haven't talked about. And if you're only a casual Kinks fan, you know what album that is because that one song you know, it's on that album. Let's get on to number one. And number one is 1970s Lola versus Power Man and the Money Go Round, Part 1. Man, if Part 2 was even half this good, I wish they had released a Part 2. Yeah, it's just a great album. Everything you ever want the Kinks to do is somewhere on this album. Social commentary, satirical commentary, heartbreaking ballads, beautiful ballads, hard rockers, pop hits. It is a concept album, somewhat of a loose concept album. Pretty much kind of the story of maybe, let's say, two brothers trying to form a band. Times are hard. They're trying to sell their songs. Things are so bad that one of them may even have to get back in line for unemployment or, whatever the equivalent of unemployment was in England. But then one of their songs becomes a hit. And in the narrative on this album, the song, which kind of even stands out because it doesn't sound like the other songs so far on the album, the song that Ray Davies has decided, I'm going to write this sort of concept album, right? About like people trying to struggle to become stars and they write this hit and then they become stars. The song he chose was Lola. So like, how did he luck into that one? Because there's other really good songs on this album that maybe he could have chosen to. But he decides literally to make that song, which changes the characters' lives on this album, to be the one that kind of ultimately maybe changed their career, as it is, I think, the thing they're known for, maybe more than anything else. Maybe You Really Got Me could be up there. But Lola's easily in the conversation. Lose points for that, Riali. But anyways, so then they get their song, then they appear on Top of the Pops. Great hard rock number. Then the Money Go Round happens because who knows if they're even going to get paid for all their hard work because everybody's dipping from their pockets. This Time Tomorrow, one of the best songs they've ever written, along with the second song, Strangers, a Dave Davies song, which one of the best songs Dave's ever written. Maybe Dave's best song. Absolutely ridiculously good song. Second song on here. It opens with a song called The Contenders, which starts off maybe an acoustic type thing, but then it hits some really, really good hard rock energy, and it sounds really good. The playing is fantastic on this album. Strangers is fantastic. But yeah, the second side, we have two more really good hard rockers in Rats and Power Man. 8 Man is a silly little fun little number. And then we close out with Got to Be Free, which echoes the opening acoustic part from The Contenders. So again, we even have bookends to open and close this album. So that by the time you listen to that Got to Be Free song, you're reminded of the beginning. You probably want to go back and just listen to the whole thing all over again because that's how good it is. Yeah, it's just a fantastic album. everything they do it on this album. They do it well. Dave has two of his best songs in Strangers and Rats. 8-Man is a great little fun pop number. Lola was a huge hit. The sounds on here are great. The energy is great. Like, there is nothing wrong with this album. And this was the fifth in their run of 6 perfect albums, if you ask me. We're not counting Percy. It's a soundtrack. But those 6 albums from Face to Face through Muswell, which included this one, unparalleled. Just very few bands have enjoyed that kind of run. But yeah, that's my number 1, Lola versus Power Man and the Money Go Round, Part 1. All right, people. So that is my list of my top 10 Kinks, all of them together. If you go back to that other video, in fact, there they are. No, I'm not going to show you. I snapped, but I'm not actually going to put the list on there because maybe I want you to go back and watch that other one just for selfish reasons, right? Completely 100% selfish reasons. But anyways, thanks for watching. Let me know why I'm so horribly wrong on Think Visual and Word of Mouth. And if you go back and listen to Sleepwalker and discover its hidden beauty, let me know. I would appreciate that feedback. But other than that, comment, subscribe, like, and most importantly, go out there and listen to music, people, because that's the whole point of this, is to get people to listen to music. So go do that. Peace. Take care, y'all.